over the past 2 years of isolation from other human beings, I can't tell you how much it means to me to see you every Sunday. Your smiling faces. It really is a joy, and I appreciate this so much. Seeing you and all the work I know that goes into putting on these services. I'm a little nervous. I have written down here. Anyways, I have found this place a place of peace and reason in this time of chaotic times that we're living in. And I've formed friendships over the years, and I have even found times of inspiration from others, and a feeling of belonging, tremendous feeling of belonging. The very first service I came to in this church, Mellon came around to each one of us and gave us one of these. I don't know how many of you remember this service. She gave us these things to each and every person, and it says, "All sentient beings from the divine." And I still have this, and I have this on my refrigerator as a reminder of her presence and the presence of all of you here. Many of us here have missed the actual physical presence of one another. For me, the most important thing you can give to another person is being present for that person. And it's been a tremendous loss not to have a physical presence. A perfect example is Anne Marie. I hope I don't embarrass you, but the first time I ever met you, I knew what kind of a person you were from seeing you on the screen, but what in your presence, it was magnified like 100 times. You actually being there in front of me for the first time, and I can say that about many of you here. So that to me is very important, and I am looking forward to being present to others in our community. And Bob gave a wonderful talk last week about how much it meant to him, how this community has been like a family to him. And it hasn't happened overnight. It's been years and years of people giving of themselves. And so I would just like to say that this time of year is a time that we have to remind you to contribute to our church. And we can't really put a price on these things. And but we still have bills to pay, just like we all do. And so that's why I'm here talking to you today, to let you know how much this community means to me, and to ask each of you to consider being generous financially to us too. Thank you. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you so much, Tony, for sharing. And would you join with me in saying our affirmation together? Here we go. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve the needs of all beings, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with the source of our being. So true. And we have a treat for you from Deb.
I'm going to be reading a story And so I will have the electronic page in front of me, so I won't be able to see much of what's going on or anything. But this is a story I heard a couple months ago. It's the words of Craig Schindler, who originally coined the term the Great Turning and wrote the first known book about it. The term has been picked up by many other people since. But this is his story in his own words that he read at a conference I was at via Zoom on March 30th of this year. I know you all have your own journeys that led you to the Great Turning. I thought I would share a little of mine. In 1981, my first baby, a son, was born on the anniversary of Hiroshima Day. And as I held him in my arms, I experienced the preciousness of the sacredness of life. And I felt the terrible juxtaposition with these weapons of mass destruction that can destroy life as we know it. So I decided I would go on a personal quest to Los Alamos, New Mexico, the birthplace of the atomic age, in search of a vision of a way out of our terrible, terrible dilemma that we've been a warring species for 5,000 years, and yet somehow we need to transform ourselves so that we will never use these weapons against each other or against all life. So I went to Los Alamos, which is set in northern New Mexico at about 7,000 feet. It's absolutely spectacular there. And I went down to the high mesas in the ancient Pueblo cliff dwellings and Bandelier just below Los Alamos, and I prayed with all my heart. I mean, I really rolled around in my prayer. You know, when you're praying beyond yourself, because you know it's beyond all of us. And I prayed. And I felt the ancient Anasazi people who lived there 1,000 years ago. And then I experienced the future generations 1,000 years from now. And I realized that we who are alive today are the bridge people. And that if we do not awaken to do our part to heal the earth, the future generations are not likely to be able to come. But when we step forward, rise up, and create the Great Turning by living it, away from self-destruction, now in our time, then we will make it possible for the future generations to come. And I experienced the joyful call to graduate from our war-weary adolescence as a human species to our conscious adulthood, to realize the light of our soul and the spiritual emergence of humanity. And in that moment, I had this experience that I cannot describe to you in words. The future generations will bless us. Let us celebrate our time as the Great Turning. And that is where the term the Great Turning first came to me from the future. In 1985, with Dr. Gary Lapide, who was then professor at Stanford Medical School, and Theo Brown, who was executive director of National Ground Zero Day, we founded Project Victory. We titled it Project Victory because we recognize that no one is winning if the earth is dying, and that in our era of weapons of mass destruction and climate change, the only true lasting victory is a victory for all the children and for all the generations to come. 2 years later, you can imagine how the divine works in our lives. Somehow we were back at Los Alamos with the full cooperation of Los Alamos Labs and Dr. Louis Rosen to participate in a national dialogue with members of Congress, with citizens from 17 states, conservatives and liberals, and members of the military, on reducing the risk of nuclear war. I don't know how things like that happen. All I know is that we are carried along by a much greater force, and for 30 years we have done national dialogues on the fate of the earth, on peace and security, on climate change, on chemical weapons, and most importantly, on improving communication across race and interfaith cooperation. So here's what I want to say to you, my friends. It is a really joyful call because we have a purpose far greater than our small self, and that purpose compels us to wake up from our trance of every day and live a more enlightened and transformative life. We know in our lives that overcoming a struggle gives us meaning and fulfillment. Imagine that the great turning away from the threat of extinction is now one of the most daunting challenges ever faced by the human spirit. This is the call. This is our time, and it will not be easy. It will require, as I said earlier, and these are really Maddie Port's words, every fiber of our being. But we are blessed, deeply blessed, all of us, to live now because we have the opportunity to rise to save our humanity and restore our home, the earth. And as Nelson Mandela once said, coming out of prison, it always seems impossible until we make it happen. Now I have 3 grandchildren, ages 3, 2, and a 4-week-old, that I hold in my arms. And I believe with every fiber of my being that as millions of us, and I mean millions of us, rise to live the great turning, our children will have an increasing chance of living in a more compassionate, just, and sustainable world.
Thank you for those words, those inspiring words, Deb. Deb is now getting ready to share a video, to screen share a video of Fran and David Korten. So we're in for a treat.
Where we're at now is waking up at a very fundamental level to questions that have to do with the nature of life, with the nature of being human, with our human possibilities, and most fundamentally, our relationship with a living earth. What becomes evident is that we have organized as a global society around money and around making money as if it were the purpose of society and the purpose of life, which on the face of it is absurd. And yet we have been lulled into this by our economic theories and by the drive for corporate power, so that we accept something that is totally contrary to our nature and is basically driving us toward the destruction of Earth's capacity to support life, and as a human society is leading to the most extreme concentration of wealth and power that has ever been known in the human experience. Even those of us who enjoy fairly significant wealth, our lives are more stressful. We are burdened with increasing insecurity because if we lose our jobs or we lose our financial independence in some kind of financial crash, we can be thrust into very desperate situations very quickly.
People are looking for new answers. They know that this system is not working. Right now, the latest statistics for the United States is that 3 people own as much wealth as half the US population. That's both a tremendous threat to the stability of the society and a tremendous opportunity to rethink, how are we operating? Why is this occurring? What can we do to shift it? One small program that we featured it in Yes Magazine, it spread like crazy on the web, was where the U.S. Department of Agriculture began to double the value of food stamps at farmers markets. It enables a family to have more fresh food, so they become healthier. It enables the farmers to have a bigger market for their food, and that those farms are local, they're often organic, they are restoring the land, and it builds community. So yes, policy, even small policies, can have these tremendous spin-off effects. So there is so much that could be done, and a lot of it is not hugely expensive.
I really don't know whether I'll see a shift in my lifetime. The institutions of corporate power hold such power, and the control of the media and the weird politics that we're caught up in, which are based on deepening the misunderstanding of our real situation and real nature. It's very easy to lose hope.
At the same time, we do have this awakening going on. Now, is that enough to really begin the change? Only if there are also institutions that welcome people to be part of a wonderful future. We try to do that at Yes Magazine.
The truth we need to embrace to find our way forward is so obvious. It is so simple. And it is absolutely known by nearly every person on the planet. It starts with a simple fact that we are living beings born of and nurtured by a living earth, which means that rather than exploiting earth for a quick profit through methods that are destroying its capacity to serve life, we have to recognize that as living beings, our role is to work with Earth, that Earth's health and well-being is the foundation of our health and well-being. And, it's a truth that indigenous peoples grew up with and have known for time immemorial. The thing that we need to reorient ourselves around is knowledge that is inherent in pretty much every human mind.
For the beauty of the earth, this spinning blue-green ball, yes, Gaia, mother of everything, we walk gently across your back to come together again in this place, to remember how we can live, to remember who we are, to create how we will be. Gaia, our home, the lap in which we live, welcome us. Barbara J. Peskin. Sing with us. Please sing with us, muted, This Pretty Planet.
This pretty planet spinning through space, your garden, your harbor, your holy place. Golden sun going down, gentle blue giants spin us around, all through the night, safe till the morning light. This pretty planet spinning through space, your garden, your harbor, your holy place. Golden sun going down, your gentle blue giant spin us around. Oh, sun going down, your garden, your harbor, the morning light. This pretty planet spinning through space, your garden, your harbor, spin us around. Golden sun going down, your garden, your harbor, spin us around. Golden sun going down.
Thank you to Jelaine and the virtual choir for that beautiful piece. I'm so excited that we're talking about the ideas behind this book. David Korten, who you just saw with his wife, Fran, wrote this book, The Great Turning, back in 2006. A lot has gone on since then, and there's a whole lot to cover in here. We're just going to highlight a few things. So here we go. Albert Einstein famously observed, "No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it." Our task is to bring forth the higher levels of human consciousness and recreate our cultures and institutions to align with our possibilities. Throughout the 20th century, most revolutionaries used guns to wrest control of dominator institutions from ruling elites in the name of justice. They missed the truth that violence begets violence. Domination begets domination, and dominator institutions are unjust no matter the party affiliation of the rulers. Violent competition for dominator power is the way of empire, and its practices affirm empire. Societies based on the organizing principles of community, democracy, and love of life are created only by living them into being through the practice of community, democracy, and love of life. A few of the 20th century greatest leaders, most notably Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., worked with a higher vision of how truly transformational change comes about. Not from the barrel of a gun, but from living the change that we seek. Their vision and example inspired the great global social movements of the 20th century that demonstrated the human capacities for radically democratic, nonviolent self-organization and prepared the way for our current work. The leaders of empire use the power and resources of the institutions of empire to motivate followers to submit to their personal authority, values, and definition of purpose. Leadership for Earth community emerges through processes of mutual empowerment that encourage every person to recognize and express their capacities for leadership on behalf of the whole. Almost inevitably, this leadership comes from outside the institutions of empire, from the growing millions of people with the mature consciousness that enables them to envision the possibilities of this human moment and to accept responsibility for bringing those possibilities into being. In Earth community, leadership roles evolve and rotate in response to the needs of the situation and the skills and circumstances of the participants. Although the leadership styles of Earth community may seem chaotic and diffuse to those accustomed to the dominator roles of empire, they fit the pattern for which all healthy living systems self-organize. This pattern of self-organizing distributed power gives contemporary social movements their distinctive vitality, and makes them nearly impossible to suppress. So, we're going to share 4 strategies that Korten espouses. Global civil society is appropriately engaged on many fronts, a reflection of its diversity and complexity of its task. Because its leadership is diffuse and self-organizing, it may seem odd to speak of strategy, yet each act by each of its many leaders and the convergent expression of those acts reveal an implicit strategy with 4 essential imperatives. Number 1, accelerate the awakening of cultural and spiritual consciousness. Yay! We're all for that, aren't we? Empire's fabricated culture creates a kind of trance. Awakening from that trance occurs one individual at a time. But each occurrence creates a new role model to inspire others. The greater the number of active role models, the more quickly the awakening spreads. And the more easily the culturally liberated are able to find one another, to break free from the powerlessness induced by isolation. We facilitate the process of awakening through our individual engagement and dialogue with others, creating cross-cultural experiences, encouraging deep reflection on meaning and values, exposing the contradiction of empire, spreading awareness of unrealized human possibilities by changing the prevailing stories. Number 2, resist empire's assault on cultures, families, communities, and nature. This means resisting the institutions and agendas of empire, demanding the repeal of unjust and undemocratic rules, and abolishing programs that serve empire's interests at the expense of community. The resistance can be assertive and may involve principled civil disobedience, but it must always adhere to the principles of nonviolence as practiced by Gandhi in India's independence movement, Martin Luther King Jr. in the US civil rights movement, and other nonviolent resistance movements, even in the face of violent police and military repression. The discipline of nonviolence underscores Earth communities' moral authority, draws attention to the illegitimacy of empire, and breaks the cycle of violence. Number 3, form and connect with communities of congruence. The creative potential of the world's hundreds of millions of cultural and spiritual creatives is being expressed through the formation of communities of congruence, in which people develop the relationships, institutions, and authentic cultures of living societies. A community of congruence, you may ask, may be as simple as a local study group. It might be a farmer's market, a school to develop inquiring minds, or a course on voluntary simplicity, It might be a socially responsible local business, a church congregation devoted to spiritual inquiry and community service, or a holistic health clinic. No matter how small or isolated such initiatives may originally be, each creates a protected space in which diversity, experimentation, and learning can flourish to create the building blocks of a new mainstream economy, politics, and culture. As communities of congruence grow and connect, they advance the process of liberation from the cultural trance of empire and offer visible manifestations of the possibilities of Earth community. Individually and collectively, they become attractors of the life energy that empire has co-opted, thus weakening empire and strengthening Earth community to an emergent process of displacement and eventual succession. I just picture us all pulling out of anything that reeks of empire and putting our energy into Earth communities. Number 4, build a majoritarian, I'll say that again, majoritarian political base. As the base strengthens and the stories of Earth community are refined, the next task is to build a majoritarian political base. This requires taking the culture of Earth community mainstream through the many formal and informal communications channels beyond corporate control. On guard, Elon Musk. As communities of congruence begin to tip the balance of the public culture in favor of Earth community, the radical democratization of the formal institutions of economy, politics, and culture will follow. So these 4 strategic undertakings are sequential in that each prepares the way for the next. They are also simultaneous in that each is currently in play, developing at its own pace and contributing to the birth process. New initiatives are always in gestation as others are reaching maturity. Each expression flows from authentic values, advances the awakening of cultural and spiritual consciousness, expands communities of congruence, and accelerates the redirection of life energy from empire to Earth community. So, those are David Korten's way of expressing those 4 strategic initiatives that can be rich for discussion going forward. And the next part of our talk is change the story, change the future. What are the stories that we are telling ourselves? If you feel out of step with the way things are going in your community, nation, and the world, take heart. Your distress indicates that you are among the sane in an insane world and in very good company. Recall the observation of Elizabeth Sahtouris in chapter 17. which we haven't looked at today, that life has characteristically learned to cooperate through experiencing the negative consequences of unbridled competition. This is the present situation of our species. For some 5,000 years, we have experienced the consequences of this unbridled competition. These consequences have now become so severe, and the overhead costs of maintaining empire's dominator hierarchy so high that either we learn to cooperate or we suffer the fate of other unviable species that failed to learn life's most essential lesson. So I want to hold up here a graphic. Break the silence and the isolation. Well, change the story, break the silence and end the isolation. So here you go. That's our low-tech way of sharing that. Okay. It is hard to admit that we have been living a lie, as to do so seems to call into question our intelligence and integrity. Yet we are in good company, for living a lie has been a chronic affliction of most members of our species for thousands of years. Let us celebrate the awakening that is the key to breaking free from empire's play or die dynamic. Walk away from the king and join in solidarity to create a different game. It is the basic principle articulated in the question that drove the resistance to the draft in the US during the Vietnam War. What if they called a war and nobody came? The momentum is building. Around the world are organizations from the grassroots up to take back their lives, reject calls to war and violence, rebuild their local communities and economies, democratize their political institutions, and create authentic cultures. Most Earth community initiatives are small and tentative. Many disappear without a trace, but hope lies in the geometric growth of their numbers, scale, and the linkages among them. Some, like the landless workers movement in Brazil and the Green Belt movement in Kenya, have already achieved sufficient scale to inspire people throughout the world. Millions of such initiatives give substance to a shared vision of the world that can be. The faster they grow and link, the faster the human story changes. And the faster the life energy of the human species turns away from empire and aligns with Earth community. So does this resonate with you? I hope so. We are getting a wake-up call that we cannot ignore. How we respond will determine whether creation's gift of reflective consciousness was well conceived or overly reckless. To pass the test before us, we humans must demonstrate the intelligence and the moral maturity to liberate ourselves from the addictions of empire and to use our gifts wisely in the service of the whole. And a little aside, I can't help but think of how Western Europe is now having to pull away from the use of fossil fuels from that dominator empire of Russia and Putin. The time has come. Rather than give in to despair in this often frightening time, let us rejoice in the privilege of being alive at a moment of creative opportunity unprecedented in the human experience. Peace and justice for all, and a sustainable relationship to the planet are within our reach. If we fail to embrace the opportunity, empire's pessimistic assumption that we are an inherently destructive species becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we continue on the path of the great unraveling. If we pass the test, we move on to the exploration and realization of untold new possibilities. Our time has come to trade the sorrows of empire for the joys of Earth community. Let our descendants look back on this time as the time of the great turning, when humanity made a bold choice to birth a new era devoted to actualizing the highest potentials of our human nature. The work begins with embracing the truth that it is within our means to choose our future and to place our capacity for reflective choice at the service of creation's continued unfolding. We are the ones we've been waiting for. And now we have a time where we can think about what are the things we want to pick up. Maybe as COVID comes to an end or not, do them now. And so we're going to have, I'll share a little bit, and then Hallie is going to share some thoughts. And perhaps we'll have time for a moment or two of others. If not, you're invited to stay and we can keep talking in coffee hour. So I will say mine pretty quickly. Two things I want to pick up and continue are what we've done the last couple of years of COVID, and Tina Bindel and I and others. I had met during the harvest season, probably August, September, something like that, on Monday mornings. We'll see what dates actually work for us. And we do a produce share right outside here at the church. And anyone who has extra produce to share can bring it down. We'll sit out there. Anybody can come and help themselves. You don't have to bring anything. Just come and
Take a tomato.
take a tomato, take what you want, and visit.
And visit.
So those of you who are planting gardens, you could plant a little extra to share. And so we've been doing that, and we'll keep going with it.
Yay.
Right here in our community, one of those small initiatives that David Korten was talking about. And along in those lines, I have made a decision that I want to open up my garden, which I inherited from my father. It was not me who created this huge garden, 140 feet long by 20 to 40 feet wide. That's a lot. And so I'd like to invite people to come up and work in the garden with me. details of how and when and all that to be worked out. At the very least, pulling weeds, pulling grassroots, and then sharing in the bounty. So I would like to offer that.
Right.
That's what I'm picking up. And now a chance for Hallie. Hallie, would you unmute? And Deb, could you highlight her?
What? Unmute myself. Get there? Well, if you think I'm going to be able to give you a sentence or two on this huge topic, I see that the time, we're about at the end of the time, and I've been taking notes throughout. Of course, it all resonates a lot with me. My life revolves around taking care of Earth. It's my biggest passion, as it is, I know, for others here. I actually, and I have so many things to say about it. I would like to offer that maybe we have a somewhat regular service time to focus on this issue, because it is gigantic. It is huge. There are so many different things, approaches to say about it. You know, the deep reflection, yes, we have plastics need to go, big ag needs to go. Our transportation system, we need to have a lot of deep reflection. It's not just changing to electric cars. It's all the pavement, all the earth that we've covered with this damn pavement, sorry. But is that what we want? So I think population, I get a kick out of Vermont, complaining because, our population, we're not having enough kids being born, and we need more people. And I'm going, what? We should celebrate that we aren't having as many people. That's a fantastic thing. So there's just many, many things to look at. And so I would like to just leave you with the idea of, to be continued. This is a very important topic, I think, to keep going with, and we've introduced it well today, and maybe we could keep it going. And I will quit for now. But I could do, I'd love to help with further services. I've got plenty of material I'd like to share, but enough for today, I think. Thank you.
Unmuted. Am I unmuted? Yes. Now we will have the song, "We Shall Be Known."
Please sing along with us. You may not be as familiar with this song as some of our other hymns that we do, but we're going to repeat the song 3 times. So if you listen the first time and kind of get a feel for it, there's finger snapping in there as our only accompaniment. So feel free to snap your fingers, move with us, sing with us, and think about these wonderful words.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change of life from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change of life from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
Thank you for sharing that song with us, singing it. And now we will have closing words read by Anne Marie.
The closing words today come from our wonderful book that, as Hallie said, we've just begun to explore this wonderful and amazing topic, David Korten. One of the framers of the book with him was Vandana Shiva, and she's known as an amazing peace and justice activist and an environmental steward her whole life. When she was asked, how do you do it? How do you do this work? How do you continue to do this work? And what she said was, this much I know. I do not allow myself to be overcome by hopelessness, no matter how tough the situation. I believe that if you just do your little bit without thinking of the bigness of what you stand against, if you turn to the enlargement of your own capacities, just that in itself creates new potential. She says, I function like a free being. What we owe each other is a celebration of life, and to replace fear and hopelessness with fearlessness and joy. What we owe each other is a celebration of life. Go in peace. Thank you.
Do you want